Welcome to the Illinois Divorce Guide podcast, where we break down the complex and emotional process of divorce into manageable, easy-to-understand steps. I'm your host, Greer Howard, and with me is Bobby Buchanan, widely recognized as one of Illinois' top divorce attorneys, offering unmatched insight and experience in family law. Well, we are back with another episode. Great to be here with you, Bobby, and we are continuing our conversation from last week about money drains. So we're going to roll right into this one. And, a lot of times the money drains has to do with errors or delays or disorganization. And the biggest money delay that we're going to start off with today is that conflict. Bobby, conflict can be the most expensive, line item in a divorce. So why don't we talk a little bit about that and why just the conflict of divorce can be so expensive?
Absolutely, Greer. It's good to see you and to be here to talk about how we can ultimately save money in the divorce process and get through this without, hitting rock bottom financially. And this one, conflict, it's kind of so obvious in a certain way that we want to get through our divorce without conflict. But how it creeps up and costs you money can be a little bit unexpected for people. I mean, we're all about at Buchanan Law Group getting through that divorce in a smart, fast, and private way. And you do that by eliminating as much conflict as you can. So I think it's definitely worthwhile to dive into this, understand the cost of conflict and why it's so expensive.
Yeah. Could you sort of break down a little bit, maybe give a couple of examples of how conflict kind of equals spending more money when it comes to divorce?
Yeah, I think people really underestimate how you don't, or how can I say this? They underestimate what the time commitment is in the process when there's conflict involved. A lot of people don't want to work through it with their spouse directly, and they kind of just throw their hands up and say, let's let the judge decide, as if it's just, you submit a problem to the judge and the judge makes a quick decision on it. Nothing is quick when it comes to court. If you can't work it out at the mediation table or at the kitchen table or your attorney's settlement meetings, then the judge has to get involved. But what that means is that you're now preparing evidence, you're filing motions, you're going to multiple court dates. Judges don't want to make decisions generally. They try to push it off to the attorneys. So they're really forcing you to not make them decide. And then eventually, maybe 6 months into it, the judge sets a hearing. It's a very stressful event because your attorney has to prep you. They have to prep themselves and the other witnesses. And then you do a hearing and then the judge decides. And all of that I just described is easily 5 figures in attorney's fees and takes months and months and months. So, we'll just let the judge decide is generally a pretty poor tactic if you're trying to get through this quickly and as affordably as possible.
Yeah. You know what it makes me think about, Bobby, is sometimes we talk about, that no one really wins a divorce, right? But I think it's a natural, inclination that sometimes people feel like they want to win or they want to feel like, they are the good parent or that the other is the bad parent. And that's where some of this conflict comes from. So do you think sometimes like you're sort of disregarding the financial side because you're so wrapped up in being the good parent or being the winner, and maybe you're not even realizing, what that's actually costing you at the end of the day?
Yeah, going through a divorce is like the ultimate test of can you put your ego aside? The more that your ego gets involved with it and you want to be the quote unquote winner, or you want to make sure that the judge points to the other person and says, you're a bad parent, the more you're going to get wrapped up. And there is going to be 2 losers in this whole process because really when there's conflict involved, everyone always says the only winners are the attorneys because of how expensive the whole process is. And that's where a lot of attorneys, or not a lot, but a fair amount, get a bad reputation because they can instigate that conflict. So that's something that you have to watch out for as well. Are you hiring an attorney that is kind of conflict driven, that really is most comfortable in the courtroom and wants to litigate everything. Those attorneys are great if you have the type of divorce that maybe is in the 5% or even less, that's like incredibly toxic. There is zero path forward at the mediation table or at the settlement table. But most people, even you think, oh, that's me, I'm betting it's not you. I'm betting that we can work through this and figure out a way to get through it without you having to spend 5-6 figures on attorney's fees. The people often say the best settlements are the ones where both sides are slightly disappointed or slightly unhappy with it. I mean, that's what compromise is. We have to compromise from both sides in order to come up with a settlement and get through this with as little conflict as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a little known tone audit rule where, if you're going to send a message to somebody and maybe you're feeling heated, can you explain the tone audit rule and how it might be helpful in the area of conflict during divorce?
Yeah, I mean, a tone audit rule is basically being very deliberate in how you communicate and putting something down in a text message or an email. And before you do that, before you hit send, you really look at it and say, how does this sound? What am I putting out there? Is this a blaming energy? Am I coming off angry or resentful? And audit your own tone. And honestly, with the emergence of all these really accessible AI tools, this is a perfect thing to do with AI. To create something in ChatGPT or Gemini and put in a prompt that says, create me a tone audit rule so that I make sure I don't send my spouse a message that might derail my settlement in my divorce. And I guarantee you AI could be very good at doing something like this. So being deliberate in how we communicate is extremely important during this process.
Yeah, that's such a great tip. I use AI for a lot of things, and I hadn't thought about, for tone. So yeah, that's kind of a fun tip. And that could be for a lot of areas in life, actually. Well, let's move on to another hidden money drain when it comes to divorce, and that is avoiding financial documents as opposed to just getting them together. I understand that sometimes with financial documents, it can be overwhelming. You might be a little fearful. You might be even embarrassed. I think sometimes people are even like embarrassed by financial documents. But why don't you sort of just talk through how avoiding them can cost you a lot of money?
Yeah, except for like the 5% of us, those real spreadsheet nerds, money nerds that love getting into the weeds on their money. Most of us don't. Most of us avoid it. I know I'm one of those people. I don't love combing through credit card statements to see what I'm spending on groceries and entertainment and that sort of thing. So having to do that when you're under the magnifying glass of other attorneys, the other side, can be really, really daunting. And there's no way around it. If you avoid it, it's going to cost you a lot of money. The same information is going to be exposed, but instead of the other side paying for it, you might have to pay for it. Like if you delay litigation or delay the other side getting documents, the judge could order that you pay attorney's fees for both you and the other attorney. So
Oh,
yeah, it can be tricky. You really have to rip the Band-Aid off when it comes to these financials. And the more you can just do it, the better off you'll be.
yeah. And why don't you just remind people really quick what some of those documents might be for the people out there that aren't coming through their credit card statements? What are some of those documents that are pretty important in the divorce process?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to start with this document called the financial affidavit. And that's going to be, I think it's 10 or 11 pages. It's the standard form that comes from Illinois, and every single state has one. But Illinois is 10 or 11 pages, and it goes through everything from the details of what you're earning, what you're spending, what your assets are, what your debts. So you're going to fill that out. And then there's supporting documents that you have to turn over as well. It's usually bank statements, tax returns, W-2s. And then if the other side wants other documents, they can request those. So if you put something in your financial affidavit that maybe raises a question, or they see something in one of your bank statements that raises a question, they say, oh, could we get your life insurance payments for the last 12 months to make sure that nothing has lapsed or something like that, you got to turn those over. That's where people can get in a little bit of trouble, is they don't want to voluntarily do it. They say to their attorney, well, why are we just doing whatever they want us to do? It seems like their attorney is kind of driving the ship here. If you want to fight over discovery, you're going to lose every single time. We try to do it informally, just request the document, hand it over, so that we can avoid the formal process. The formal process of discovery is what you'll trigger if you don't want to voluntarily give things over. And once you trigger it, then you're going to be delivered a list of 100 different documents you have to turn over, and you don't have an option whatsoever. And if you don't do it, you can start to get sanctioned by the court and all these other things. So really cooperating in this process is incredibly important to keeping the attorney's fees down.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on to another hidden truth about some financial drains with divorce. And, that one is basically time, like how much time it takes. Time is literally money in a divorce. And it could be that like every month, there's like certain expenses, like every month that goes by, it's like ticking to more expenses. But honestly, it's generally, I just think it's the more time that it takes, would you say, the more expensive your divorce is going to be?
Yeah, absolutely. A slow divorce is an expensive divorce. And the slower it goes, the more attorney's fees you're going to get, the more redundancy you're going to get in your case. If like most things in life, divorce benefits from momentum. So if things are moving along, if decisions are being made, if there's some goodwill being built, you can build off of all of that momentum in order to get your divorce done quickly. Whereas if you're slow to make decisions, you're slow to get back to your attorney's slow to get back to you, and you guys aren't able to create a flow and a cooperation, then you're going to end up going in circles. And I see this all the time of people complaining about their attorneys, maybe asking them the same questions again, or asking for the same documents, or asking for updates on documents. That's what happens in a slow divorce, is you end up going in circles, and it can be very frustrating, and it can feel like you're paying your attorney to do the same thing over and over again. So avoiding that is absolutely key.
Yeah. And why do you think that sometimes, people just are kind of have the indecision, right? Like they're kind of stuck and they're having a hard time moving forward, or making a decision so that the case can move forward, because I do think people run into that. It's like they're having a hard time kind of deciding.
Yeah, I think it's fear. Ultimately, I think it's fear about what the next steps are going to hold. Fear and its close cousin, anger. You're probably angry at your spouse for what went down in the marriage, and the fact that you are ultimately having to break your vows that you made to each other, and how hard that sounds. Yeah, I wish there was. Those are the hardest things, because as attorneys, we are objective in the way that we see it. We're not emotionally tied to the case, and we can break down the different decision-making points for our clients pretty easily. But we can't, like they say, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. Our clients don't always make those decisions as quickly as we want them. So I would really encourage you, as someone going through divorce, if you are, to have, someone to confide in, maybe looking at getting a divorce coach. Divorce coach is something that we haven't talked about much, and probably we should bring one on here to talk to. But a divorce coach is kind of like a therapist, but someone who also is really about action and pushing you through the process and getting you to the other side. So understanding that making decisions quickly is really going to make this process better. And I think I have written down here one of the other big expenses of going slow in your divorce is just the emotional exhaustion. It's like, it's so hard to you can't rebuild your life until you can get through the divorce. As long as you're in divorce limbo, trying to figure out the settlement, trying to figure out where you're going to live, even just having the status of married over you still makes it really hard to think about getting into another relationship. If a lot of people do date while they are still married because they've been emotionally divorced for a while, but their partner that they're dating is hesitant to get more serious because they're like, well, what's going on here? Why aren't you divorced yet? So there's all these these things that get slowed down, and just the emotional cost of that also makes it more difficult to move forward in your career. It's hard to put the bandwidth that you need into a career, into a profession, while you're also being dragged down and burdened by the emotional cost of a divorce.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, the last thing we're going to talk about here today about a hidden financial drain is fighting about the little things and forgetting maybe or ignoring some of those bigger financial assets. So let's kind of give a few examples. I think that we're talking about things maybe you have an emotional tie to potentially, or you're just fighting over some things that really don't matter. But what would that kind of look like, you think? Give some examples.
I mean, I've heard stories of people fighting over, alarm clocks and, toasters and that sort of thing. And you kind of ask yourself, are you fighting over this because it actually is valuable to you, even emotionally valuable to you, or are you just fighting over it because you don't know how to stop? You're just like addicted to fighting over things, and it's really, there's so much ego involved in your case that you can't stand the idea of giving anything to your spouse. So, I mean, it's easy for me to sit here and talk to people about let go of the wedding china, or let go of we don't even have to think about pictures anymore.
Yeah,
Pictures are all
true.
shareable.
It's easy.
um and sometimes there's like jewelry or stuff like that, but usually that stuff, when we back away and get our ego out of it, there's a pretty clear kind of moral owner to those things. I'm not going to fight over the jewelry of my, that my wife got from her grandmother or something like that. Like you have to be in a totally different mind state to be doing that. So the less we can be emotionally attached to things, the better. And even I think the really tough one is pets. When it comes to pets, like people can get really attached to pets, but ultimately I think it's better if one person keeps the pets rather than like continuing to be tied together by some schedule where we're sharing the pet even after we get divorced. So the less that we can be emotionally tied to things, the better. I promise you, your happiness and your vitality is not going to come from these sorts of things. And once you get through the divorce, you'll get newer things or things that are more meaningful on that side. So really looking closely at, like, do I really need this? And maybe I don't even want the reminders of these things anymore. That is my challenge to you, is letting go of the things as much as possible.
Yeah, yeah, that's really great advice. And, what would be some of the things that when you are kind of wrapped up into some of those, physical things that you're emotionally attached to, that you might be ignoring, that you really should be paying attention to? What are some things that you've seen in your past that, they're wrapped up into something else and you're going, hold on, don't forget about this over here. This is going to make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could get so wrapped up in fighting over the toaster that you forget about, like, there was a second retirement account that your spouse had, or, about the equity in the house. Attorneys, unless they're the super money hungry ones that just don't care, which I promise you is few and far between, a lot fewer and a lot farther between than most people would think. We don't like it when people spend $10,000 of attorney's fees fighting over something that's worth $500. That's just silly. And so we often come down to this place where we're looking at, we've gotten the whole divorce done, but there's a list of items and we're going through them. And most judges won't even decide on this stuff at all. They say, I am not going to make decisions on personal items. The attorneys have to figure that out with their clients. And so the quicker you can do that, come up with some sort of process, even like, doing a lottery or picking items out of a hat or some sort of draft. So, I get first pick, you get second. Just keep it simple and move through it to get this divorce done.
Yeah. Well, Bobby, it seems like a lot of the things we've talked about today about the financial drains it's really like letting your emotions almost get in the way. And because of the emotions being elevated, you're maybe not making the best financial decisions. It sort of feels like there's a theme today. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. The emotional temperature is going to cost you money, and going to court is way more expensive than therapy, is way more expensive than, a good retreat with your girlfriends or being able to confide in your parents. Like, court is super expensive and stressful, and there's so many other ways, and you're not even going to get necessarily what you want at the end of the day. You're most likely not. Like, most likely you're going to, quote unquote, lose in court. Now, if your attorney says, hey, we got to go to court because they're just being completely unreasonable, then take your attorney's advice. But it is so rare that an attorney actually says, we need to litigate this. Like, that is generally not the advice at all. Usually it's, we need to negotiate this and just come to a resolution that you can live with. And even if on paper it looks like, oh, they got $10,000 more than I did, well, guess what? You didn't spend $10,000 fighting over it in attorney's fees. You're past it, and now you're moving on. Don't keep score with your spouse on that sort of stuff. You want to get the big stuff done. You want to make sure you get half of the equity in the house, half of the retirement accounts, half of the liquid assets. But don't get caught fighting over the edges. That's really the biggest trap there is. So handle your emotions, find your peace, take your lawyer's advice, get through your divorce quickly.
That's right. I think a therapist might be worth the money during this time.
Absolutely.
Well, Bobby, thanks as always for being here with us today. And, we really covered a lot. We're going to continue our conversation next time about, some more, ways that it can be expensive when redo that. All right. Well, thank you, Bobby, for today and all of your advice. It's always so, so good. And we're going to continue this conversation next week. And we're talking about parenting time and child support and some, potential hidden financial drains to watch for in both of those scenarios. So until then, if you have any questions or comments, make sure to let us know, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Illinois Divorce Guide podcast. We hope today's episode gave you clarity and support as you move forward on your journey. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Tune in next week for more insights and expert advice on the Illinois Divorce Guide podcast.